Well met, lords and ladies, Jacob Butter speaking, and a warm welcome to this week's Walking Wednesday. Now, if you've seen the title of this, I've got something interesting that I want to talk about for most of what this is, but just for the sake of getting it out of the way first, let's address the Maddie situation that has been happening for the past week, let's say. I'm not sure exactly when this all kicked off again, but you know, the estimate that I have is that it was, or at least how I first found out that Maddie was once again talking about the whole drama and situations that have been going down since 2022, but mostly from, like, you know, September, October time last year as when it reached its peak. So I won't do a summary of everything that went down, essentially, partly because I've already did that. You know, the Maddie's Gotcha Rant Part 1 covers the initial parts of the timeline right before most people started getting caught in the crossfire, let's say. So with that in mind, I'm going to operate under the assumption that most people know what's been going down from either from that or from some of the updates, or just because the people watching this are either people who have never heard of Maddie before, such as my family, or that's unless they remember from other Walking Wednesdays, or people who already have been interacting with her a lot more than I have. Because that's the thing, I haven't been around that much this week, partly because of the lingering remains of the internet issues that have now kind of resolved themselves mostly, but also just because, you know, I'm on holiday and I've been out and about doing other things. You know, here I am again in the town one over. We're going to watch a movie in a bit, and then afterwards, in a few hours after the movie finishes, I have D&D. So, you know, a lot's happening today particularly, but, you know, there's by no means an exception. And the thing I want to talk about later is also something that happened this week. But I did check out what was going on. I didn't offer any comments on what was happening, but people kept me informed, basically. Because I've become sort of, you know, the face of you know, the calling out of Maddie, let's say. Because also I was the person who, you know, kick-started that process, and that's the one that gets remembered, you know, for how that's gone down. But yeah, so I looked into things. Someone sent me from one of Maddie's new channels, I think it was SUT, which I think stands for Sweet Unicorn Tales. From the SUT channel, there was a video that was called The Whole Truth, and that one was, you know, essentially, it wasn't the whole truth, as Bond pointed out. It was Maddie expressing her side. I don't know why she waited until nearly a year since it was brought up, because I'm pretty sure I released the Maddie's Gotcha Rant in September. She kind of went under the radar, and that was mostly it. So, but anyway, she said something. I guess she felt prepared to do so. I don't know. It seemed like she was trying to well, clear her own name, obviously. You know, disprove the idea that she had lied. You know, saying that that, you know, I and the other people who talked about her had lied instead. You know, the classic situation, and reiterating her piety, let's say, or at least attempting to do so. And yeah, like it would have been perfect as far as, you know, as far as the release of part 2, because I think I said, actually, you know, if Maddie put a you know, a territive line again, to quote Mrs. Weasley, I would you know, that's when I would put things together. I mean, essentially, you know, ever since September, you know, I've been like a a cowboy, hand reaching into the holster, you know, but did not draw any weapons. As it turns out, I don't think I really need to, because of something that that came as a consequence of that video, it seems, or at least maybe in correlation to it, maybe not as a consequence. On the Super Pops fan Discord server, like the franchise Discord server, the one that's owned by Eli, that one is actually, sorry, I just had people speaking English behind me, I got distracted for a second. Yeah. So on that server, what happened was there's a new channel that was added, basically, that was called Talk to Maddie. So apparently Maddie sent a request to, I believe it was Eli, directly, the owner of the server, saying that you know, can I talk to people? Because, you know, like just before, like back in 2022, that was a thing that she like commented to me after like my Walking Wednesday, talking about her initially. She asked me in a couple of videos, in comments and such, you know, saying, you know, why do you think I am this way? What is it that I did that makes you believe that you know, that this is my intention, or something along those lines? I'm paraphrasing, obviously, because those comments have been long since deleted. But that was the way that, you know, she was like, okay, I want to know what I did wrong. So I, of course, explained what she did wrong. And this is a repeat thing that happens a lot of the time. She'll talk to discuss things either on her channel or to somebody else, asking what she did wrong. Someone will explain that, she will forget the explanation, and then rinse repeat all over again. So yeah, not the best system. But that's essentially what happened again. Like the Discord thread was addressing to everyone supposedly. I was informed of it, but I didn't reply at all. But yeah, that's another thing, by the way, that we did with like community posts prior to that. That's where a lot of screenshots for the Maddie's Gacha Rant Part 1 came from, actually. But yeah, in this case, to stay on topic, in this case, yeah, she basically opened up that discussion again. You know, why people think I'm manipulative. Mostly it was Bond saying, you know, no one said you were manipulative except for Josh. Why would you assume that everyone else did? For the record, I may have said that in the Maddie's Gacha Rant Part 1. I don't remember, but it's very likely that I did, because, quite frankly, a lot of the things, to explain, you know, a lot of the practices that Maddie seemed to be employing did seem manipulative, to me at least. You know, that's why I, you know, expressed those views. Much like Maddie seems to have an issue with people critiquing, you know, her expression of views. That is exactly what I'm doing here. So yeah, the takeaway of that is, sorry, I'm just crossing the road here. So the takeaway from that, you know, because I didn't comment, so most of it was a case of, you know, Bond establishing that, you know, Maddie does assume a lot of things, and then afterwards, like Maddie interpreted that as being called a liar again. Now, of course, what happens when Maddie tries to claim that she's not a liar? Well, everyone pulls out the receipts they have of her lying, because we have plenty. We have been documenting this for almost a year, as I've mentioned before. So, yeah. In fact, I think there was like a lot of stuff that happened back in April, which is when I started collecting things. So it's been over a year. April 2024 was when that went down. So yeah, like essentially that's exactly what Bond did. You know, pointing out that the SUT channel was supposed to be, you know, a clandestine operation. in the Whole Truth video as well, she does say that she has been making a bunch of alt accounts out of a panic of what might happen. What might happen, you know, if her return is you know, publicly acknowledged. To be clear, I've known about the SUT username and such for a long time, and there is also I do have like a list of like 30 different usernames that that Maddie has undergone over the years, and the explanation for those actually was simply, you know, she gets inspiration for a different idea, and then goes ahead and makes them, because that was a practice long before I even met Maddie to begin with. Because I mean, back at that point, I knew about Maddie's Dolls and Fairy Tales, Maddie's Gotcha, Blue Unicorn, and there was one more, Maddie's Extra. That's what it was called at the time. Already she had 4. Then other people point out there was a few others. There were some links that went to other different videos, and I'm not sure if she knows the pattern here. I'm guessing that she didn't. That you know, while I did make a note of the different channels, I only discussed videos or posts that were, you know, relevant to the drama. You know, I'm not exactly gonna be like, oh wow, you know what, she's doing another live action cover of this particular song, which is one of her old video ideas that I have seen, because that has nothing to do with anything. So yeah, it was just a case of, you know, I'm talking about, you know, the bad practices that she has been employing, you know, to both when it comes to her own friends and mine. So that's all I really care about. So as far as, you know, I was concerned, as though like nothing happened on the SUT channel, I wasn't really going to even mention it, and no one mentioned it to me. It was only when the SUT channel uploaded the Whole Truth video that someone forwarded it to me, and there we go. So yeah, and I think it's actually this is actually something called the Streisand effect, where you know, somebody tries to conceal a certain amount of information, and it ends up getting more attention than they hoped it would because of the attempt to hide it. But so yeah. Sorry, I'm just again checking on different you know, vehicles around me. This has gone on for a bit longer than I was hoping for. I want to talk about this really cool theatre piece that I saw. So yeah, again, all that is mostly context behind this. There are some other people who, like Ghost Kitty, for example, who jumped in on this. I think Kid Abby came in just after Maddie left. There was a bit of leapfrogging back and forth. She attempted to apologize several times. Bon reiterated that sorry wasn't enough, but that's all that she was, you know, able to do in that moment. And this is where, because I'm fairly convinced that Maddie is going to watch this video. Again, let me explain why this is not being put forward. So when it comes to a lot of people, particularly people online, I have found, at least in the friendship groups that I have ended up landing in, they have issues with you know, giving people other chances when they've let them down before, or just even if they have, you know, hurt them to a large enough degree. So, you know, when it comes to me, for example, you know, I mean, Maddie hasn't exactly, you know, hurt me on a personal level. If anything, a lot of her attempts to discredit me are hilarious. And mostly it's hurt my brand image, but that's, you know, not exactly what I would call personal. for a lot of other people who were more involved in like discussing things with her, or ones that she like reached out to, because again, she largely ignored me particularly, or didn't respond to me directly, but responded to other people, you know, either acting on my behalf or who chose to respond because, you know, they wanted to help me out the same way that I would do for them, the same way that Maddie's own friends have done for her. So when it comes to that, that's where a lot of the either personal attacks or attempts to discredit them end up going further, and for them that is a lot more personal. I've actually dealt with a similar situation from back in 2019 actually, so you know, long before I met, you know, Maddie, Eli, Johnny, anyone. There was actually an incident that happened, you know, from my own production company. That was in its infancy that particular year, and what happened was, you know, somebody who was again one of the first members, basically one of the first musical cast members. You know, he actually, like, for a lot of the time, one prime example of what he would do was, you know, like, vent about his own problems, which is fine, but then discredit other people when they tried to vent about theirs as if it were a competition. And a lot of the time would either you know, diminish, like, you know, what they care about, and then when it's done to him, obviously it wasn't the other way around. You know, there was a lot of incidents. He himself was being targeted and bullied by a lot of other people who were also dealt with, might I say, but that didn't make his actions any better. And eventually, you know, that caused a separation in that initial group. Now again, because like I said, he didn't really, you know, do anything to me on a personal level, aside from you know, like, he hurt my friends. But again, I'm talking about as far as like stuff that I can personally try to give a chance with. It's up to the friends if they forgive him or not, which is kind of the point, because a lot of them to this day still haven't. He was given a lot of chances to change. He admitted that he was going through a rough phase, and he even calls that time in his life his villain arc, from which he has since learnt. But the damage was already done. And that's the thing, some people just aren't as willing to forgive. And if anything, I'll say this, the willingness to forgive others, to either metaphorically, you know, turn the other cheek, or essentially, like, you know, see the positive side, is something that I actually genuinely admire about most Christians. So, you know, I can appreciate that, and that's one of the only things that I think, you know, I can personally say, yeah, that is a great value that Maddie has taken away from her religious upbringing, compared to everything else, like the transphobia, for example. Which, by the way, she said that, you know, it wasn't true that she was transphobic, but then admitted that, you know, some people just don't respect the LGBTQ+ community. So if anything, she's not just transphobic, she's homophobic as well. So all she did was, again, hurt herself. But back to what I was saying about the 2019 incident. I'm still friends with a guy to this day, as are some of the other people who were involved, but we keep them at a distance. You know, if there's ever a time was like, oh, let's do let's hang out with this particular group, or, you know, this particular group, and it's not fun to coordinate that sometimes, because it's like, oh, you know, especially if it's like a video project or something, where it's like, oh, we can get these people, they're available, oh no, they hate each other. So for some people it's just impossible to do that, and I respect that, because, you know, they don't want to be hurt in the same way again. It is a fear response, you know, to a large extent, and that's essentially what's happening here. People don't want to end up in the situation where somebody is trying to discredit them to save their own skin, essentially. Which, by the way, I would count as manipulation as well. That's another example of, you know, being manipulative. And yeah, I completely get that. For me, of course, you know, it's not like Maddie ever had a leg to stand on when it comes to attacking me, because all of the attempts were so feeble and easily disproven, like by the time I found out about them, somebody else had jumped onto it and, you know, basically, you know, done the work for me without me even realizing it was happening. Which, you know, has put them in the crossfire, and that was the issue. So yeah, that's the problem, you know, is that, you know, the idea of sorry not being enough is essentially that, you know, somebody needs to either see over a long period of time, actually, if they are willing to at all, that somebody has actually made a genuine attempt to change in some way. Like, I mean, if you're going to stick to your convictions of, you know, being homophobic and transphobic, there's not much else that I can do. I mean, essentially, you know, I called you up for it, you know, like nearly 3 years ago at this point, because we're in 2025 now, and, you know, nothing has changed, you know, so that feels like a lost cause. All that I did really was make people aware of the situation and have them draw their own conclusions. And their own conclusions are, you know, the ones that they've actually found. But unfortunately, what's happened is that Maddie has clung to the few people that she's able to, you know, hold on to, whether it's the opinions of her parents that instilled those beliefs in her in the first place, or, you know, the friends that have not turned away from her, particularly the online ones. And that's another example of her, you know, making sure to reiterate how much, you know, they mean to her, like that kind of thing. You know, make sure that they never actually turn away. They have enough positive reinforcement that any negative reinforcement does not affect them. That's also manipulation, by the way. So yeah, that's essentially that. So that's the complicated part. So again, that's up to them. You know, I would love to see a situation where, you know, like, I mean, Matt even promised me that years ago, where she was like, you know, maybe I'll be more accepting of my friend. You know, that was the thing where she said, you know, can I talk to you about Jesus someday? I said, yeah, sure, why not? Not that I didn't know about Jesus already, but I was just like, hey, you know, this is something here. You know, wonder if there's something we can actually, you know, talk about at some point, you know, but in a more civilized manner. And it never ended up happening, unfortunately, and she did those comments. She also deleted the video that I was talking about before, the whole truth one, because, you know, that she felt like that was, again, an action that she could take, but again, Bond reiterated that was not what he himself was after. By this point, it was only him really talking to Maddie, because everyone else sort of like backed off to let him cook. So that video, to my knowledge, is gone. Replaced instead with one that came out after Maddie basically said, you know, I hate you all because you won't forgive me. I'm leaving the server anyway. After, you know, begging to stay a couple of times. And yeah, the video itself, I watched the other one. It seems, well, Bond described it best as, you know, it seemed like Maddie was apologizing more to her fans than she was to the people actually involved. Like, the one person she mentions by name in the video was her friend Nat, who also commented on the video saying, you know, it's okay, you know, I'll stick with you. So again, same situation. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it could be that, you know, that was an attempt, but it seems like, again, she's done it before, where she's apologized for things. She's admitted to lying now compared to before, which means that she was lying when she said she didn't lie. And like every time she has a panic response, something ends up being worse. I'm hoping that now, at least, with like some attempt of an apology, even if it seems like it was probably also panic one because it was like very quickly edited. It was also a classic thing of like, you know, I'm a horrible person, I'm a bad gotcha tuber, you know, that kind of thing. You know, like pity searching to some degree, rather than taking accountability. That's why it's not going down so well with people, you know, in that particular thread. But yeah, like again, this is something where, you know, like clearly the negative ramifications of Maddie's actions have stuck with her The problem is they've also stuck with the other people. As much as you know, I end up, you know, compiling the stuff and mostly being the informant and becoming, like, again, the face of the movement. So if one would call it that, and if that's the right word or not, it's beyond me at this point. It's beyond any one person, including Maddie herself. So, I mean, this essentially almost feels like kind of like the tragic end to everything. Like, again, you know, I don't regret starting this whole process, because I think it needed to happen, especially if people who deserve to know the truth now know it, and they drew their own conclusions based on the information, and that's brilliant. That's what we want. So I don't regret starting this, but I regret how it ended, I think, because, you know, like, it ended in a way where basically no one wins, except technically me, I guess, but that was never really the point. So, you know, there's that. Again, I was gonna make this video a lot more about this theatre performance that I ended up seeing this week. It was in a local place, but I ended up talking much more about the about the situation. It felt more important to address. Essentially, like, the theatre thing was an open air theatre thing that was called Charlatan Rodriguez, and it was essentially, it's gonna sound very ironic talking about this now, actually. It was about it was a one-person performance, which normally I don't like in Spanish theatre because there are a lot of them and they're not that good in my opinion. A lot of them end up being meta commentaries, which at some point need meta commentaries of their own. But this one was more of, you know, it was an all audiences thing, and it was about a con man, actually. It's a one-person performance about a con man. The guy Felix Rodriguez, I think, was the name that you know, of the actor. So Charlatan Rodriguez was, you know, Chatterbox Rodriguez, and well, charlatans are also, you know, people who would be able to, you know, the typical, you know, you got Maxi kiddo, that's kind of like salesperson. Yeah, like he said, you know, he comes to offer solutions to problems you didn't know you had for prices that you can't pay. Because, yeah, like, he demonstrates, like, how all these things happen. There's supposed to be, like, these miracle things, like, oh yeah, you know, the multiplier of notes, basically. You know, where he takes a note, he puts it through a machine, and through, you know, hey presto magic, it goes from 5 euros to 10 euros. Then the 10 euros get put back in, and you know, at one point he said, hey, maybe multiply it by -3. You never know. I don't say how much they multiply it by, but obviously he multiplied by 20, and then eventually he said, no, lesson learned here. No one ever gives money away for free, and turns it back into 5 euros. Like that kind of thing, where he gets like a volunteer for each of his particular you know, acts and such, and yeah, the first two were adults, and then the last two, then the second two were kids, and there was no adults at the end. Another great example was the happiness potion, where you know, he basically says, oh, like give me some ingredients, and the kid was like, I don't know, you know, glitter. Oh, glitter, yeah, sure, a bit of glitter, which was, you know, just a liquid that he had as a prop. I think anything that he said, it was like, oh yeah, I'll just put that in. So a bit of improv as well, basically. So he ended up you know, just mixing like basically every liquid he had, and then, you know, he said, okay, right, here we go. Also say this like tongue twister line here, and then you know, after me, he said like super quickly, so the child was, you know, had no hope of getting her underdeveloped tongue around the words, even let alone memorize them. So he basically just like puppeteered her chin like this, like that, basically, as like part of the thing. And so after that, he says, okay, I'm gonna test it out to see if it's a real happiness potion, see if it's brewed properly. Like, it was fantastic, blah, 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 blah. Like, as he like bowed down, basically, all the liquid goes on the floor. And then he was like, oh yeah, so here, have your potion. Oh, it's gone. let this be a lesson to you. Never leave your happiness in other people's hands. There was a lot of those where it was like, where it was jokes, magic, made up product, life lesson. Not in that order necessarily. So yeah, it was a really fun time. And a lot of them were, it was the case of, it was fun, visual gags and delivery for the kids, but commentary for the adults. Like, oh yeah, this lesson for here is that Abanca always wins. Which was, Abanca is the name of a bank that is, I think it's the third most popular bank in Galicia, or maybe the most popular. I'm not sure. It's up there basically. So, there's it was that kind of thing. And the part that I'm sure that my parents will remember is the part where at the very beginning, where he comes out, he had like a mixing soundboard basically, where he's like mixing music in real time. Even though I think it was mostly pre-recorded, but still. Like it starts off with like a dun 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 dun. And of course, he comes out and goes, ah, ha, 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 yeah, ha, 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 ha. Like that's basically his opening, and there he is, like putting on his hat and his cape on top of his suit that he has, to complete the magician salesperson look. And right away, first thing he did was request audience participation, because he had like this he had a couple of songs as well in between to demonstrate these things, but the one at the beginning was just his introduction for himself. And let me tell you, as somebody who has done a sales pitch before via song, it is an extremely effective method. And I didn't think about audience participation at that point. I was kind of like sang in their faces, but in his case, he was like, okay, all I would need you to do is is when it gets to a certain point in the song, sing Charlatan Rodriguez like that, and you'll know when. It was pretty obvious when, basically. It was something like, so like it was the chorus where he was basically like he's the best, the best, he's so great, Charlatan Rodriguez, blah 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 blah, Charlatan Rodriguez. So yeah, I would love to talk about it more, like I had a whole thing prepared and such. I remember like most of what happened, but again, important situations to discuss basically. Weirdly enough, also kind of like poetically appropriate, I would say. If you think about it, never leave your happiness in the hands of other people is probably a lesson that Maddie can take, to be honest, because she's based so much of her own happiness on either her audience or her friends' validation that she forgot about, I guess, self-fulfillment, I guess. And part of that I can definitely say is that being torn down for your own convictions, and I somewhat get that. If they didn't harm any others, then I would say that would have been a regretful outcome, but there you go. So hopefully, that process will start with herself, and maybe, just maybe, if people are still keeping tabs on her, then they'll see a better side, if indeed there is one.